Dr. Lisa Coleman, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Global Inclusion and Strategic Innovation at NYU, and I use she and her pronouns. I hope that everyone is taking very good care. We are thrilled to welcome you to Transformation Talks, where we spotlight leaders to learn from their journeys and gain knowledge about how to be agents working toward transformational change across our organizations. In the Office of Global Inclusion, we engage global diversity and inclusion principles with an intersectional focus on nimbleness, inclusivity, resilience, transformation, growth mindsets, design thinking, and adaptivity in all of our work. Transformation Talks is part of NYU's Be Together initiative centered on innovating, activating, and transforming as a community together. Today, we have the distinct honor to welcome Dean Raghu Sundaram. Thank you so much for being with us today. How are you today?
Doing very well, thank you. And really, such a pleasure to be on the show with you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to now tell you a little bit about, about our dean. Raghu Sundaram is the dean and the Edward I. Altman Professor of Credit and Debt Management at New York University's Leonard N. School of Business. He was appointed dean on January 1st, 2018, having previously served as the vice dean for MBA programs and online learning. His work in finance spans a number of areas, including agency problems, executive compensation, corporate finance, derivatives pricing, and credit risk and credit derivatives. He has also published extensively in mathematical economics, decision theory, and game theory. His research has appeared in leading academic journals in finance and economics, as well as in several practitioner-oriented journals. He is the author of two books: a first course in optimization theory, Cambridge University Press, 1996, and Derivatives, Principles and Practice, McGraw-Hill, 2010. He has taught courses across Stern's undergraduate MBA, PhD, and executive education programs. Of all the awards he has received over the years, he is most proud of being the inaugural recipient of the Stern's Distinguished Teaching Award in 2007. He has a long record in service to the school and to the university, including as the chair of the Tenure and Tenure Track Faculty Senators Council and as a member of NYU's Presidential Search Committee in 2014. He currently serves as a member of the Academic Council of Krea University and the Advisory Council of Shiv University, Delhi-NCR, both in India. And he is also on the advisory board of the Antai College of Economics and Management at the University of Beijing in China. As Dean and Vice Dean, Dean Sundaram has led the launch of multiple new degree programs, including two one-year MBA programs, a number of specialized master's programs, and the extension of the school's New York-based executive MBA program to Washington, D.C. He has overseen Stern's entry into online education and the establishment of new high-profile initiatives at the intersection of entrepreneurship and technology, notably the Endless Frontiers Labs. He has also established the office's first Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Prior to joining NYU Stern in 1996, he was on the faculty of the University of Rochester from 1988 to 1996. He received a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics from the University of Madras, India, in MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, and a PhD in economics from Cornell University. It is my absolute pleasure to have you with us today. I'd like to kick us off by just asking the first question.
Thank you, Lisa. It's really a pleasure to be here, as I said.
You know, with each one of our guests, we like to start off by asking them a little bit about how they define success and transformation. So I'd like to begin, as I do with each one of our guests, as part of this Transformation Talk series. So as an accomplished leader and change agent, how do you define success, progress, and or transformation within the context of your first 3 years of the role? And we already know that you've accomplished quite a bit as I've read that bio. So tell us a little bit about how you've been able to do all of that.
Um, so thank you for those kind words. I think really when I stepped into the role as dean, I'd already been vice dean of MBA programs for 2 years, but I'd also been at Stern for 25, for at that time for 22 years at Stern and NYU. And the great advantage of being at an institution like the Stern School in a university like NYU is that I was in an institution that is always thinking ahead, never sitting back and saying, this is the way we've done things for 200 years and we're not going to change that. So I was lucky to head into at the Stern School, for example, we launched international study programs for our undergraduates. We take every one of our undergraduate students abroad and back, giving most of them their first taste of a genuine international experience 20 years ago. Long before people started talking about globalization, Stern was heading and actually doing globalization. In this context, it becomes easier to build on change. So as an academic institution, you ask the question, how do you measure success? I mean, we are in an academic institution, which means there are 2 or 3 criteria that really matter to us. One, the visibility, the impact of our faculty and their research, especially on public policy, on matters of public interest. Are they leading the discussions? 2, how visible are our academic programs? How influential are they? How much are people beating a path to our door, both students and employers who want to do positive change in the world? 3, how successful are our students? What is the kind of experience they have? How enriching is it? And where do they go on from here? I think those are, and based on those criteria, as I said, Stern was already a very, very strong school. It was easy to build on that background, look at the way the world was moving, and try to keep ahead of that move by directing that change. I think the 2 or 3 major areas that we focused on, one was undoubtedly leadership. The second was bringing technology and entrepreneurship front and center into the school. And the third was globalizing our reach, not only in terms of expanding our physical footprint by going into DC and Shanghai, but also our cyber footprint by launching online programs. And so some of our certificate programs, for example, we've had students from more than 100 countries take those courses. And that's, I think 112 countries at last count, students that had taken those online courses. If I appear to be all over the place on the answer, what I'm trying to say is that I think to express myself more precisely, we have many, many different stakeholders in our community. How we view success as students, how we view success as employees, how we view success as administrators, as board members, as faculty members. Every one of those is important to us, and we're promoting the school on every one of those fronts.
That is not, your answer was not all over the place at all. You talked about the faculty, you talked about the students, and you also, which I think is important, you began by talking about how you've built on some of the success already. And I think far too often we know this, leaders come in and they just start anew without looking at building on some of those past successes, which then can accelerate a lot of your successes, which is exactly what you've been able to do. And then the other part that you mentioned, which I think is crucial, as you talked about leadership, technology, entrepreneurship, and as you talked about globalization, but the shifts in globalization from 20 years ago to today. But a lot of what you've done, including the not just the physical expansion, but as you said, your cyber footprint, is forward thinking. It's thinking about what is emerging, what is happening next. So I just can't say enough, and just such impressive work. And so as we think about this, and as much research demonstrates, you can't have this kind of innovation Without global diversity, equity, inclusion, and thinking about that link to innovation. And you sort of hinted as this as you started to talk about globalization and some of the work that you're doing. So, as the professor and dean of the Stern School of Business, and as a leader of initiatives such as the Endless Frontier Labs, which we'd love to hear a little bit more about, tell us a little bit about the role of innovation in your work, and also tell us a little bit about the link, right, as you think about leadership and innovation to global diversity, inclusion, etc.
So the let me begin with the leadership aspect. I think we are never going to be more successful than our teams. There is no such thing as one person doing everything. Everything is done by an entire team. We are never going to be more successful than our teams. We can easily be less successful. So I think the key aspect has been having a wonderful team to work with, empowering them, and most importantly, I think letting them lead the discussion forward. Now, in this context, when one has a team, if the team is an echo chamber, you're not going to get anywhere because you're going to be discussing the same thing over and over again, going in circles. The wonderful thing about having a diverse team is that clarity emerges from every discussion because there are so many different points of view and perspectives that are brought into the discussion. And as a group, our school leadership, for example, 15 of us meet 3 times a week for an hour each time, just discussing what's going on in each program in the school. And everybody offers advice to every program on what is happening, whether it's the undergraduate college, the executive programs, the MBA programs, our global programs, our online programs, our PhD programs, whether it's a faculty issues with the administrator. So I think teamwork is the most important aspect of, I think, what we do. And the diversity of the team is central to the team actually being effective. And I think this is what has enabled us in many ways to take on new challenges, because the minute somebody applies an innovation successfully to one part of the school, the other part of the school looks at this and says, wow, I want to try that too. So for example, many years ago, when I was heading MBA programs, we took a significant expansion of what we call experiential learning, which is really what I consider at the time that I did my MBA, the way theory met practice was through case studies. You had a theoretical framework that helped you think about a problem, and then you were given a case, and then you had to use the theory to solve the case. Case studies are very, very useful, but in some sense, they're also so 20th century. Now, what do? We are in the heart of New York. We have live problems that our companies around us are facing, whether they're small companies, they're nonprofits, they're startups, they're large companies, they're Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. So we source those problems and we hand them as projects to our students in experiential learning courses. This started with our full-time MBA program. Now 600 students also take experiential learning courses every year in the MBA program. The other programs looked at this and said, wow, this is a wonderful thing for us to do. So the undergraduate college is now getting into experiential learning. Executive programs is getting into experiential learning. Everybody wants to do this because you learn so much. As I said, it's where the rubber meets the road. Your theory meets a live problem, not a problem presented in the case. So every bit of the innovation we do, I think, comes out of the teamwork and the direction of the team. So you talked about the Endless Frontier Labs. Now, here is an example, I think, of something that we've done. Again, it's been the outcome of tremendous leadership in the Endless Frontier Labs by my colleague Deepak Hegde, but also tremendous collaboration from across the school. A number of faculty participate from across the university. It has participation from the Langone Medical School, from Tandon, from Courant, from Arts and Sciences. It's got, but what we're proudest of is not the incredible group of mentors we managed to get, not the incredible group of VCs who are involved in the program, not the incredible group of faculty who are involved, but the kind of startups we have brought front and center into the program. The Endless Frontier Labs is, I think, the most successful program of its sort of any university in the country by far. But here is one statistic to tell you why we're so proud of the startups. Across the country, something like 4%, 3% of all startups have a female founder. In the graduating class of the Endless Frontier Labs in 2021, 48% of the companies had a female founder. It was 25% in our first year, grew to about 35% or so by a second year, 48%. On average, I think it's been over a third. And it's a very conscious number that we are pushing. So I think this is incredibly important to both our students who work with these firms, to the mentors who want to support these firms. We like to walk the talk, so to speak, here, in terms of what we're doing and how we do it.
That is just fantastic. And you really outlined so many. So the teamwork part, I cannot say enough. We emphasize this across all of our work, really thinking about how teams come together, how you cultivate teams, and of course, letting those teams lead. So thank you so much for talking about that. And also, thank you for talking about also thinking about diversity of disciplines and bringing different minds to bear. I think sometimes when people think about diversity of thought, they don't think about also difference of experience, right? And so all of those things that come to bear. So thank you for making that link and talking about that. And then the female founders, well, what can we say? That is just amazing. As we know, the challenges are tremendous across these areas, and that is bravo. So just
Thank
bravo.
you.
Absolutely, well done. So so let's talk a little bit about because this is one of the things that, and we were just talking about this as we came onto camera. One of the things that I love about higher education is transgenerational engagement. And the fact and the kind of collaboration that can occur. So some of the things that you were talking about earlier. And so a friend of mine asks me, and this is a sort of a question that she asks a lot of people in her life, is what would your 8-year-old self think of you today? And so my answer is my 8-year-old self could not have imagined me today. I mean, traveling the globe, doing things like that. So all of those kinds of things. But one of the things that we like to ask is, tell us a little bit about something that you're most proud of. Now, we know you're proud of your teaching. We obviously know you're proud of probably the Female Founders Lab. So maybe tell us something else. But also talk to us a little bit about a challenge, something that, you saw a challenge, you realized it was a challenge, and then you kind of overcame that challenge. Because a lot of our people out there who are, across the generations, once you get to the leadership side, it looks like, oh, smooth sailing the whole way. So it's useful for some of our listeners to hear about some of the things that people have had to actually also be challenged by.
Okay, so I'm going to react to that first part about the 8-year-old. I don't think when I was 8 years old, I understood anything about the world. There was this mysterious place called office where parents went and they came back. You had no idea what happened in these offices or anything. So I don't know about 8-year-old, maybe 15-year-old. I don't know. I don't know. If I had to mention one thing about the state of the school today that I'm proudest of, I think I'm almost irrelevant to the school today. That if I leave, the team we have the good fortune of having a fantastic team in place that will continue smoothly on the path. We work very collaboratively as a group. And to me, if I had to say one thing that I think I really believe that it is that there was a time when I took over as dean, when articulating a vision was important, articulating strategy, and then creating a coordinator. So what we did as a team, as I said, is we meet very, very frequently, but as a team, we began with my laying out an overarching strategy for the school. And then everybody developed sub-strategies for their units. And then everybody listened to, we had each week, one group would make a presentation on what it was that their goals were, what their challenges were, what their aspirations were, and where they thought they could make the maximum impact. That team, as I said, really functions as a well-oiled unit right now. And so if I had to say something I'm proudest of, it is that there is, I won't be missed for a minute. I think it's thing, and I think it's a really nice thing to be able to say that. You were asking about challenges. I think Um, so the Stern School, for factors beyond our own control, went through some very, very difficult times in the mid 2010s. The financial, when the we were a school in 2008 that was heavily leveraged on one industry, on finance. So in 2009, 61% of our MBA graduates went into the financial sector. 2008-9, the upheavals in the financial sector led to significant problems on two fronts. One is, of course, jobs were vanishing, but as a top finance school, that didn't affect us that much. What really affected us was we have a part-time MBA program, which was highly dependent on the Goldmans and the Morgan Stanleys sending their students to our MBA program even while they were working, and that sponsorship dried up. It just dried up completely. Firms cut their sponsorship down to zero. And when that happened, our enrollments took a significant hit. It was not a one-time hit. It was a steady decline over the years till 2014. This started affecting our finances very, very severely. And so the school was in a reasonable amount of trouble, and that was compounded by an really unfortunate error where in data submission to the most important ranking US News and World Report, there was an error in the data submission, and US News did not give us a chance to correct the error. Instead, they penalized us, and they explicitly mentioned that the ranking was being penalized because of a data submission error, which we had not been allowed to correct. So overnight, the school fell to number 20 in the rankings, and we had angry alumni, board members saying, "What is happening? The school is declining." It was, as I said, these were mistakes that anybody could make, and factors that are outside our control. So the most important thing was this provided us also with enormous opportunity. When the financial sector is booming and things are going well, it's hard to convince people of the need for us to start changing as a school. But the minute the financial sector started wobbling for us, it made it very easy for us to talk about why we had to expand our perspectives, our views, and diversify our portfolio. So we went through some very, very challenging times as a school, but we reacted as a school. The faculty was overwhelmingly supportive. The students were overwhelmingly supportive. I did lots of alumni meetings asking them about directions we should go in. And everywhere alumni were overwhelmingly supportive, our board members. So as a school, we managed to effect very considerable change to move to where we are from where we were in 2015-16 and this was under my predecessor's leadership. Peter Henry was the dean. And the one most important thing that I've learned from Peter is I used to meet with him very frequently to discuss what we were doing. And I cannot emphasize this enough. The freedom he gave me once he listened to me, it's something I try to emulate myself. He said, "Okay, let's go ahead and do this." There was unstinting support for what needed to be done. So we've done well as a school, but it's also been through some really tough times because our finances took a major hit. There was one year when we had to freeze salaries and considerable dissatisfaction for a while. We had to even cut back on a little bit on financial aid because that was the last thing we wanted to actually cut. Now much of that has been restored back to now. I'm sorry, it was a very long answer, but
no, just a terrific. So I'll start where you began by we would miss you. So we would miss you terribly. But I understand what you're saying about succession planning and transition and alignment and the infrastructure that you've been able to create in terms of thinking about that well-oiled team and how that's working. So congratulations on that. I think a lot of leaders far too often do not think about succession. What does it look like? And we know that if we can get away from ego leadership, then we can move toward this kind of leadership that is really about transformation and change, which you obviously embody. And then thank you for talking with us, because I think the challenges that you talked about. And so, and for those who are out there thinking about the challenges, the economic challenges from 2008 to 2010, and certainly in the financial and economics sectors that were outside of universities, but had real impact on what was happening. But also, thanks for also talking about taking and some of the mistakes that were made, and mistakes can be made independently, and compounded, as you talked about, and then that the compounding, and what happens with that. But also, thank you for talking about, and this is most important, I think, for leaders out there, for emerging leaders, taking those mistakes, learning from them, and using the opportunity to pivot, which is exactly what you talked about. And then lastly, for underscoring that leadership and support, support in bringing new ideas and in hearing new ideas, because I think far too often we go to our supervisors, our leaders, or whatever, we suggest new ideas, and they're like, get out of here. But that is really important to what you also said about the economic, the moment for, looking at the moment for change. Because the moment for change is often, as people, as sort of things are free falling, as it were, It gives an opportunity for a different kind of change. So thank you again. Thank you again. Just, I'm sure so many of our emerging leaders are appreciating this conversation. Then next question I really want to ask you about is, in our office, we work across, obviously, university campuses, disciplines, and fields. We have lots of partners, as you know, that are outside of higher education. And so as you think about supporting the development of global leaders, and you've talked about your students, and also, which would include to some degree your alumni population, what are some of the core strengths or leadership skills that you think enable a leader to remain nimble, agile, forward thinking, to do some of the things that you've been able to do?
So I think New York, NYU provide almost natural crucibles for this, because in today's world, so can I be rude about something for a minute?
Absolutely.
In the 1990s, Deutsche Bank, I can't remember the year, 95, 94, something like that, Deutsche Bank announced that it was some small news story about how it had decided that it was going to try and become a global powerhouse in investment banking and everything else. And there was a picture of the board. And the board consisted of not just 12 white men, but 12 white German. And we started thinking, are you really going to construct a global company out of this? I think, to me, the most incredible part of being in New York and being at NYU almost naturally is that almost every day, in every facet of your life, you're interacting with people who come from a global background and the perspectives they bring in, and that makes it so much easier as you emerge into working life for you to interact with people from different backgrounds, for you to be able to listen to them. And in some sense, we have a very natural advantage being in New York and at NYU in this. But the most wonderful thing that NYU has done is not stop there, but take New York to the world, so to speak, Shanghai and Abu Dhabi being predominant examples, but also all our global sites. And we try to interact with many of them. Right? We have programs with many programs with NYU Shanghai. We have 2 existing master's programs and 2 more new master's programs if you're starting with them. We are talking to Abu Dhabi about doing programs with them. I think the idea is, our students, of course, we have many global programs. Our students travel abroad, they do lots of work, but they get that interaction here also. But part of the interaction is also taking our ideas to other parts of the world and interacting with them directly. I think that is a phenomenal advantage of being in New York and the experience that you can get. One has to be conscious about it. One, it's not going to be automatic, but you have to consciously exploit the advantage that you have and develop a completely different kind of leadership.
Thank you, and thank you for talking about about the bank. We know, right, in the 90s and even in the early 2000s in some cases, and in some cases still today, there are too many places where, right, that still is the case. And what we also know is that the world has shifted. The world has shifted, and New York is what as a one place, right? And I for one agree with you. I love it. It's a place to really think about what's emerging globally and all the
Mhm,
connections that are happening. And
mhm,
and if we think about, as we talked about earlier, emerging generations, they're definitely very connected.
mhm,
So we definitely want to be ready. So
mhm.
we're coming to the end, and this is really the last question. So, given your leadership journey, could you share a piece of advice or something you wish you had known earlier in your career? And then also tell us something that gives you joy, something that helps sustain you. You know, we all go through difficult times. Leadership is not, it's not exactly always smooth. So tell us something that gives you joy that helps to sustain you as well.
Um, I don't know, I mentioned metrics of success, right? Like if you see any of those metrics of success do well, makes you very happy. So yesterday I received an email from a student who had listened to one of my Zoom interviews with, uh, and he wanted to be connected to that person. So I said we can't normally do that because these are important visitors and they don't want to. So I wrote to the person asking him, would he mind? And he said no. So it's a very small example, but it makes you so happy to be able to connect an undergraduate student to somebody very senior in the industry and create those networks. So I don't know, any kind of those kind of metrics, um, from the small to the large, make you feel like you've done something good for the day. Um, and so I think one can get fixated on taking one metric, two metrics, and saying this is all I'm obsessing about. But the good thing is not doing that. You have so many different ways you can help.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I think I mean, sometimes we don't look at the little things. Sometimes we look for those big successes. So thanks for reminding us about the little successes along the way. This has just
Thank
been,
you.
it's been a joy. It's been a joy. Please thank and join me in thanking Dean Raghu Sundaram for coming and talking with me today. This has been our transformative talk series. We hope that you will continue to follow us in the Office of Global Inclusion for more of these transformation talks, as well as updates, events, programs, and resources. And we hope that you'll continue to partner with us as we continue to advance our efforts on working on the important work of institutional excellence in inclusion and diversity. Thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you, Lisa.